At 6:12 in the evening, a ribbon of headlights curled down County Road 14 like a centipede made of SU versus. Horns bleated. Kids in glitter shirts shouted about a harvest bash. I stood by my steel pasture gate with a padlock the size of a fist and a GoPro mounted on my cap. A minivan rolled its window down and a woman called out, asking where the petting zoo was. I pointed at the sign welded to the fence that read private farm, not a venue. Then the sirens arrived. 2 sheriff cruisers and a county fire inspector pulled up just as I clicked the lock shut. Somewhere in the pileup, a woman in a blazer and pearls climbed out of an Escalade and yelled that Graham was being unneighborly. I smiled at her. I said, "Marla, you invited 100 cars to a party that does not exist. My name is Graham Kincaid. I am a quiet weather guy. I like sunrise chores, black coffee, and a policy of letting the chickens handle gossip. My 5-acre farm backs up to Maple Crest, an HOA that believes grass should be one height and opinions should be shorter. Their president is Marla Yates. She is a part-time realtor and full-time clipboard enthusiast who once tried to fine me for visible wheelbarrows. I do not live in Maple Crest or pay their dues. I live in Willow Bend, where fences and boundaries still mean things. Marla did not like that boundary part. She called my farm an eyesore adjacent to their lifestyle brand. That was how she described it, with a straight face, like she was reading from a corporate memo. I had been farming this land for 7 years. My morning started at 5:30 with feeding the chickens, checking on the 2 dairy goats, and tending a vegetable garden that supplied half the local farmers market on Saturdays. I had 3 beehives, a small apple orchard, and a compost system that Marla considered a personal insult to her property values. She had complained about the rooster crowing at dawn, as if roosters consulted neighborhood quiet hours. She had complained about the smell of manure, even though I used it sparingly and kept it covered. She had even complained about my truck, a 1998 Ford that she claimed lowered the aesthetic standards of the entire area. Never mind that she could only see it if she stood on her deck with binoculars, which apparently she did. The newsletters started shortly after that lifestyle brand comment. They contained artfully worded paragraphs about agricultural odors and unlicensed roosters. Then pictures of my compost pile appeared on Maple Crest next door with captions suggesting biohazards. Marla stood on a step stool to peek over my fence and inventory my non-compliance. A landscaping crew she accidentally hired trimmed my hedgerow from the wrong side and left a bill in my mailbox for $350. When I told her to knock it off, she pivoted to performative philanthropy. She asked what if Graham hosted their fall family fete for Unity. I said no. She announced it anyway. But before the fake party announcement, there had been months of escalating harassment. Marla filed a complaint with the county about my chicken coop being too close to the property line. It was not. The inspector came out, measured, and left with an apologetic shrug. Then she reported my beehives as a safety hazard. Another inspector arrived, checked my registration with the state apiary program, and confirmed everything was legal. Marla sent me a certified letter demanding I remove a wooden fence post that she claimed encroached on Maple Crest land by 4 inches. I had it surveyed. The post was 6 feet inside my property line. I sent her a copy of the survey with a note that said please stop. She responded by scheduling a Maple Crest landscaping day where 20 volunteers showed up at my fence line to plant decorative shrubs, accidentally trampling my strawberry patch in the process. A glossy flyer got blasted to the HOA email list with my address, a stock photo of hay bales, and the promise of free cider, petting zoo, live music, and parking in the pasture. I found out when someone messaged me asking if the goats would be wearing costumes. I called Marla immediately. I told her to cancel it. She laughed in that high-pitched way people do when they think they have already won. She said the community was excited and that I should embrace the opportunity. I reminded her that this was my private property and I had never consented. She said that I was being difficult and that a little community spirit would do me good. I told her if anyone showed up, I would have them arrested for trespassing. She laughed again and said I would not dare. Then she hung up. I sent her 3 emails over the next week. Each one clearly stated that I did not authorize this event, that my property was not available, and that she needed to cancel immediately. She responded to the first email with a smiley face emoji. She ignored the second email. She responded to the third email by forwarding me the flyer again with a note that said, "Looking forward to seeing you there!" I forwarded all of this to my lawyer, who sent Marla a cease and desist letter. She responded to my lawyer by saying it was just a neighborhood gathering and that I was overreacting. Marla doubled down after that phone call. She filed a neighborhood event notice with the county, listing herself as site coordinator. She checked a box that said private property owner consent on file. She scheduled food trucks to use my gravel lane, which is actually an emergency access easement. She also reported me to code enforcement for unpermitted commercial activity, conveniently timed for the same night, so an officer might arrive to cite me while her caravan rolled in. She posted on the Maple Crest Facebook page that the event was confirmed and encouraged families to arrive early for the best parking spots. She even created a map showing where guests should park on my pasture, complete with little arrows and a legend. At 5:30 in the evening, I sent the sheriff screenshots of our entire email exchange. I included my deed with the easement highlighted in yellow. I attached the email where I had declined her request twice, plus the cease and desist letter from my attorney. I included the false county filing she had submitted claiming my consent. Then I chained the gate with a heavy-duty chain and a lock that would require bolt cutters to break. I posted "No trespass, no event," HOA president lying signs in a tasteful font. I set a folding chair by the mailbox, poured myself some coffee from a thermos, and waited. My nearest neighbor, a retired schoolteacher named Dorothy, walked over and asked if I needed backup. I told her the cops were on their way. She sat down in a lawn chair next to me with her phone ready to record. Deputies arrived and funneled into the chaos like traffic therapists. They read my paperwork. They read Marla's flyer. They radioed fire because if you invite 100 cars down a single-lane easement, you have invented a safety hazard. The fire inspector asked about permits. Marla changed her explanation mid-sentence, suddenly talking about community spirit as if that were a form you could file. Parents started locking eyes with me with expressions that clearly asked if this whole thing was fake. The deputies turned them around one by one, apologizing for the confusion. Then they asked Marla to step aside for a conversation. The scene was absolute chaos. Cars were backed up for a quarter mile. A food truck trying to navigate the narrow lane had gotten stuck in a ditch and was blocking traffic completely. Kids were crying because they had been promised face painting and pony rides. One father approached me and demanded to know why I was ruining a family event. I showed him the flyer and asked if he saw my name anywhere giving permission. He looked confused and then angry, but the anger shifted away from me and toward Marla. A deputy had to redirect traffic using flares because the sun was setting and visibility was dropping. Another deputy called for a tow truck for the food truck. Dorothy filmed everything and provided commentary like a nature documentary narrator describing a disaster in progress. They informed Marla that forged consent and obstruction of an emergency lane are not oopsies. Someone took her statement while she stammered about good intentions and neighborly cooperation. Someone else took my USB drive full of screenshots like it was a sacred relic. One deputy reviewed the GoPro footage of her yelling at me from the Escalade. Another deputy interviewed 3 drivers who confirmed they had come because of the HOA flyer. Marla kept insisting I had implied consent by living nearby, which made one of the deputies actually pause and ask her to repeat that sentence. She said it again, slower, as if the deputy had misunderstood. The deputy wrote it down carefully in his notebook. By 7:15, the last car had been turned around. By 7:30, Marla was being informed that the county district attorney would be reviewing the file for possible criminal charges. Court day arrived 3 weeks later with the theatrical hush of a storm bunker. I filed a civil claim for trespass by invitation, interference with quiet enjoyment, and costs for ruts in my pasture, flyers yanked off my gate, and 3 spooked hens. Their names were listed in the filing: Barbara Cluckland, Jennifer Lopez, and Yoko Ono. The judge smiled when she read that part. The county DA tacked on misdemeanor counts for filing a false document and creating a public nuisance. I played the patrol car body cam clip where Marla insists I implied consent by living nearby. The judge leaned forward and removed her glasses. She said, "That is not how property works, Miss Yates." My attorney called Dorothy as a witness. She described watching Marla stand on a step stool to photograph my property without permission on multiple occasions. She described the landscaping crew incident and the trampled strawberries. She described Marla telling neighbors at a block party that I was a problem that needed to be solved. The DA played a recording of Marla's voicemail to code enforcement claiming I was running an illegal petting zoo. The code enforcement officer testified that when he arrived to inspect, there was no petting zoo, no customers, and no commercial activity of any kind. Just a man feeding his chickens. Marla's attorney tried to argue that it was all a misunderstanding born from enthusiasm. The judge was not impressed. Orders rolled out like fence posts being driven into hard ground. Restitution for towing a stuck SUV from my ditch, $800. Restitution for pasture damage, $600. Restitution for emotional distress to 3 chickens, $150, which made several people in the gallery laugh until the judge gave them a look. Fines for the false filing totaling $2,500. 12 months of probation. A protective order barring Marla and Maple Crest HOA from contacting me or using my name in any HOA communications for 5 years. Court costs of $1,200. The HOA's insurance company declined coverage for her intentional acts, which meant Marla was personally responsible for every cent. The board voted her out the next night in an emergency meeting. Marla stood in the back of the community center with her arms crossed, her face the color of a fire engine. When the vote was called, it was unanimous. 23-0. Someone in the front row said, "Motion to never speak of this again." The room erupted in nervous laughter. Marla walked out without saying a word, and I heard later that she put her house up for sale within a month.